Hey everyone, how are you? I'm Wayne Neal from Guitar 4D, where guitar and the science of learning intersect. Today's video is on breakthrough practicing techniques, how to bust through plateaus. Here's what we're going to be learning in this video. We're going to talk about the power law of practicing. We're going to talk about deliberate practice. These are topics that I've covered in other videos in more detail, so if you want to learn more about those, check those out. Then we're going to look at the forgetting curve and then two techniques that can help you bust through plateaus in your playing. The one is spacing, the other one is interleaving. Let's get to it. Okay, so deliberate practice, the power law of practicing. Let's take a look at this. Okay, we looked at this in another video. On the left-hand side, you have accuracy and speed going up or increasing. And on the right is over time, the time that you put into practicing. And here's what that curve looks like, okay? So we tend to learn and develop our skill really quickly up to a certain level. And then regardless of how much time we practice, we only increase just a little bit. And I'm sure you've all felt that in your playing, right? You learn something, you get really good, it feels good for a while, and then you feel like you're not really improving, and it's that classic plateau that kind of happens about right there, right? We learn and we're doing well, and then all of a sudden we're not improving too much anymore. Okay, so what does deliberate practice do? Well, you can see from these charts, right, is that you can use deliberate practice to bust through that plateau and keep increasing your knowledge and skill on the instrument if you introduce these techniques. Otherwise, you just plateau and don't really get better or increase your particular skill above, in that area. So let's review deliberate practice, okay? So the big difference between deliberate practice and just normal practicing, and we're all guilty of it, and I'm certainly have been guilty of it for years. I learn a certain song and then I just enjoy playing it and playing it and playing it. It's the fun part. And sometimes you think you're practicing that and you're getting better on that song, but again, the improvements are very minimal. And if you have a particularly hard part of that song, especially typically that's in the solo, there's areas that maybe, that I hadn't got it perfectly, and every time I play it, I'm kind of hoping it goes right. But more cases than not, it doesn't. And so the idea behind deliberate practice is that you put a plan into place. For example, you sit down to practice. I'm going to learn, the major scale, 3 strings, or 3 notes per string rather, in the key of G. Okay, and I want to play that at 90 beats per minute. As cleanly as possible. That's my plan. And then I go about practicing it, all right? Assuming I've initially learned all the positions and I can play it at very slow speeds accurately, then it's a matter of getting it up to speed. And as I'm playing it, I want to reflect on, was that right? Did it sound clean? Were there other string noises? Did I miss a note or miss a string skip with my pick? What all those things, those little things that we need to correct to improve. And most people, as it turns out, they sort of have a plan, and it's usually pretty loose when they sit down and they just practice and practice and practice and don't necessarily always reflect on what I did wrong and how can I fix it. And that's the idea behind deliberate practice, okay? So let's look at the forgetting curve. This unfortunately speaks to our memory as humans. You can see here that in your initial, learning or memorization of something on, day one when you learn it is 100%. But look at that 90% line. That's where we want to keep, can we keep our memory and our recall of skills and songs and solos up at 90%. And if we don't do anything, after 10 days we've lost 40% of what we've learned. That's incredible. And after 30 days, we've lost 80% of what we learned if we haven't reviewed it and practiced it and repeated it, especially over time. So if you look at this time, here it says first reminder, but think about, first practice or first time that I play that solo for the second time. If I do that and it looks like it's about day 2 or 3, I extend my memory of that particular solo and how to play it by about 7 days. The second time I play it and review it at day 10, it extends it to 30 days for a 90% recall of that particular solo, and so on. And notice too how the intervals are spaced over a pretty long period, and that helps with your recall. So the way to, and this may be obvious to remember skills and solos is to repeat them over time and to force your brain to recall them, okay? So we're going to look at 2 techniques that will help you bust through the plateaus with deliberate practice. And the first one is spacing and the other one is interleaving. Okay, so let's look at spacing. Spacing is when you take a particular skill, A, which could be a solo, it could be an arpeggio, a scale, a song, whatever the case is, you want to play it, now. And that this is assuming too that you've learned the initial notes and you sort of have it down at a slow speed. It may be a little sloppy and there's things you need to work on and fix, etc. Typically what we do is we'll play it just over and over and over and over and over and over again, right? That's what we do when we go to the classic woodshed. But this actually works better. This not only allows you to memorize it better, but it's particularly good for recalling it. So like when you get on stage and you haven't played it 20 times in a row, like you do in practice, and it sounds really good after that 20th time, but now you go to play it on stage and you haven't practiced it 20 times, what's going to happen? This is what spacing can solve, okay? So you might play it, and these aren't set time intervals. You can move them around and do different things, but at least let 5 minutes go before you try it again. And you can work on other things or sometimes just relax and do something else. There's something about our brains too that, like when we sleep, the brain continues to learn and organize those neurons and neural pathways on things that we've learned, and it kind of clears out some garbage. It literally does that. So spacing helps in that regard as well. And then try it in 15 minutes and then 30 minutes and then an hour later. And instead of just doing it over and over and over and over again, space it out in time. And then depending on what your goal is, try it the next day and then wait 3 days and then wait 5 days and try to recall it all. And if you make a mistake, don't stop and do it again. Just recognize that mistake for next time and then move on to the next time. And it's that effort of recalling it and remembering it and fixing your mistakes that really cements it in our memory and builds those neural pathways, okay? So there's another, the Leitner system is just another approach to spacing, and this was used a lot with flashcards, which is a good form of spacing. And I call these rehearsal rooms. You can call them a box, whatever you want, is to take a list of things that you're working on, a scale, arpeggio, song, solo, and put them all in rehearsal room 1. And you play that every day. Okay, then in rehearsal room 2, you begin to play, you play those items every other day. In rehearsal room 3, once a week, room 4, bi-weekly, etc. And then there's a box called retired, and that's when you know it really well. So what happens, and the reason this works well, is what happens as you go from every day to every other day, room 1 to room 2, if you make a mistake or you don't know something, you move that back to rehearsal room 1. Even if you're all the way in room 4, you move it back to room 1. Otherwise, that skill or technique or whatever it is you're working on moves through the rooms and eventually gets retired. And what that forces you to do is it provides the spacing. So so it improves recall and learning, but it also forces the most complicated and harder stuff to be played more frequently, because they're always going to go back to room one, and you're going to keep working on that until you can work it up to it's retired, okay? So just another technique there for you. This is a particular schedule that I put together that I'm currently working for in my band. So we have some songs that we played a long time ago, and I'm relearning those. And Kid Charlemagne by Steely Dan is one of them. Really complicated for me, technical solo, 2 solos. And so I'm playing them on Monday. I usually play around 8 at night. I'll go to maybe 11. And these aren't sort of set in stone. I just want to give you an example of how I think about it, how I look at it, how I go about it. So the 2 Kid Charlemagne solos are A and B, and I will work on those on Monday, but then I'll leave them for a day because I have them sort of down, and now it's cleaning them up, getting them accurate up to tempo and being clean and accurate. That's the whole goal, right? But I'll skip Tuesday. I'll work on other things on Tuesday as designated here. I'll go back at it Wednesday. I'll skip it until Friday, etc. And so this is a way to work on a large number of things. So I have many other songs, and it's not that I work on A and B on Monday for a whole hour from 8 to 9. I'll work on, some skills, and I'll work in other songs that I'm learning as well. But this gives you an idea of just how to space it out over time. It also introduces the concept of interleaving, which we're going to look at next, and then maybe we'll come back to here to see how this is actually a combination of spacing and interleaving. So interleaving is the concept of interleaving or intermixing a couple of skills at a time rather than learning it blocked. And if you think about the way we've learned in school, in anything you kind of learn, you're taught subject A until it's exhausted. Then you move on to subject B and exhaust that subject, and then on to C. And the research is overwhelming that we learn better by interleaving the subjects. We'll work on A and B and C, and then repeat A, B, and C, and then A, B, and C again. So technically, you're putting in the same amount of time if you were to time each one of these subjects or skills or solo songs, arpeggios, etc. But in the interleaving, you will actually learn a lot more. And this has just been, again, documented over and over and over again. And I'll put a couple links in the description down below so that you can research it a little further on your own, on all these subjects actually. And you'll see that there's just an overwhelming amount of research into these techniques in terms of, and since music is one of those skills that people practice a lifetime and become expert performers, etc., music is actually studied quite a bit in this cognitive research. And so it's very interesting to look at that, but it applies beyond just music. Of course, academics is a big area of research, as well as athletics, and they put these conditions under all kinds of subjects and different conditions, and the results always come out the same, that interleaving improves your rate of learning, your rate of recall, etc. So if we go back to this spacing schedule, right, you can see that I've interleaved songs and skills together, and I'll do that even more so than what's listed here. I might do a solo, and then I'll break into that 3-string, 3-note per string major scale, all the way up the neck in G major, and then come back to the solo. Or I may take a short break and get a snack, and then come back and play it again, etc. And so I'm always interleaving all the things that I'm working on, as well as spacing them out over time. Okay, so that's it for today. If you got any value out of this video, please like it, please subscribe. I'll have more videos coming out. If you have questions, leave any questions or comments in the video, and I'll be sure to answer those right away. All right, thank you very much. See you all next time.